The Kingsman is a spy action comedy set during World War I and is a prequel to the Kingsman film series, which in itself is surprisingly based on a comic book series called The Secret Service. The movie was directed by Matthew Vaughn, who also wrote the screenplay along with Karl Gajduszek. The movie itself stars Ralph Fiennes as the main lead, with Gemma Arterton, Harris Dickinson, and Digimon Hansen acting as the main supporting cast. The movie was first announced for a late 2019 release on November 8th, but was pushed back 6 times until it was finally released on the 22nd of December 2021 in America. Now, I've never seen any of the other Kingsman films, and I knew very little about them. However, this movie in particular caught my eye in this year of cinema drought, with its trailer, which seemed to let off a fun spy movie with a mix of historical fiction, which is right up my alley, being a fan of history. Sadly, this movie disappointed me, not only with its comedy, but also its depiction of real-world events, which were given no respect and not even made fun of properly. I am getting a little ahead of myself, so let's look at the plot. This very, very loose plot. In summary, there is this guy called Orlando Oxford, who is a rich nobleman who works for a secret spy agency in his basement with his nanny and friend. After a career of fighting in the British Empire, he decides that killing people and conquering their land is bad, and so he leaves the military to join the Red Cross. This jumps us to the start of the film, which begins during the Second Boer War, 1899 to 1902, at one of the British concentration camps. That's a weird way to start a comedy. I mean, I do like how the movie gives light to a very forgotten conflict in British history, especially the camps, which I'm not going to get into and just say we're bad. Okay? We're good? Okay. So Oxford decides to meet with the literal Kitchener and tells him that he has supplies from the Red Cross, along with his child son and wife. I can't see how bringing your wife and child into a war zone could turn out bad. Nope, never happened. What could possibly go wrong? Oh. Long story short, Oxford gets shot in the leg, his wife gets branded, and his son is scarred for life. Whoops! The wife then pleads with Oxford, telling him to make sure his son never sees war. And that's pretty convenient for the story. Time skip! The boy, Conrad, is older now and wants to fight for king and country like a jolly good British man. But Oxford says no, like a party pooper, and has forced his son into an isolated and protective state over the death of his wife. Yes, he's just Finding Nemo with more guns. The two of them go to a suit store called the Kingsman, which I'm sure is coincidentally the name of the series and was probably an accident by good old Vaughn here. Anyway, Kitchener corners Oxford and tells him to talk to Archduke Ferdinand to get him out of the Balkans or something. The idea of Ferdinand and Kitchener being pen pals is hilarious. So Oxford and Conrad go to Bosnia and join the parade, sitting in the same car as the Archduke. The assassins try their assassin thing, but it's only Conrad's Wii Sports skills that saves the Duke's life. Too bad for the people behind them, but fuck them, they aren't royalty. Seeing this amazing display, the Archduke does what he does best and gets shot in the head by Gavrilo Princip. Speaking of Princip, it turns out that he and basically every single other antagonizing character of World War I are actually working for some guy who wants Scottish independence in this large League of Villains type thing. Each of them serve as spies planted into the major powers of the world, like Britain, Germany, Russia, and I guess Serbia? The one for Russia is actually Rasputin. Time skip! Rasputin is tasked with getting Russia out of the war so Germany can put all its force onto Britain, because France doesn't exist. I mean, I don't know why the main villain even started a conflict that originally didn't even involve Britain until the invasion of Belgium. What do I know? I'm just a dumb idiot poo-poo brain. To do this, Rasputin does a magic trick on Tsar Nicholas II's son, causing him a seizure or something. And Rasputin tells the king the only way to save his son is to leave the war. And he agrees, even though the real Tsar Nicholas II would never have considered this, and would never bow himself below a peasant like Rasputin, especially if he was threatening him like this. Like, what? Because he's the king! Conrad finds out about this through a letter from his cousin Felix, and he tells Kitchener. Kitchener decides to head to Russia to sort this whole thing out, but is sank by a torpedo. Whoops! Seeing Britain in danger, Oxford and his team head to Russia to kill Rasputin themselves, so Russia won't leave the war. Oh yeah, it's also here that Conrad finds out about the whole spy thing with his dad, which doesn't really change much, but whatever. Oh yeah, it was actually kind of a secret. Shh. So the team heads to Russia. Rasputin heals Oxford's leg somehow. Like, is he magical or not? Could you tell me, movie? Please? Rasputin has a very uncomfortable scene with Oxford, which isn't funny and it's just weird. And then there's a fight scene. Meh. Anyway, the nanny comes in and shoots him. Mission accomplished! And they head home. Conrad has his 18th birthday and decides to join the military, inspired by the fact he literally just stopped Russia from leaving the war and could be a secret spy with his dad. Instead, he runs off and joins the military. I mean, I would have done that, but then again, I'm not Conrad. Thankfully. After Rasputin's death, the whole movie just goes all over the place, like this 1917 thing with the son, the dad being sad and drinking with the king, all the references to King Arthur, the boring getting America to join the war plot, and all the dumbass historical justifications for events that litter this movie, like the Zimmerman telegram. Again, we'll talk about it later, but it is stupid, remember that. It's dumb. So Conrad gets himself to the front lines and has a really long collection of scenes there, which take too long, is ultra serious, totally different from the rest of the film, and just makes you wish you were watching 1917. Like, come on. Anyway, Conrad dies to friendly fire. Whoops! And we cut to the dad being sad. Yo, we're calling a time skip! The very next scene, Oxford is a drunken mess with a beard, alcohol, and the whole 9 yards without any time or development dedicated to it. Like the kiss between him and the nanny, which doesn't lead anywhere and is never mentioned ever again. The king walks in and tells him to do his job, and the very next scene, Oxford is perfect again, like the previous scene never happened. What is this pacing? It truly does suck that this depression is skipped over in one scene, because it was Oxford's fear of his son's death and the relationship between them that pushed the movie in the early scenes, and it was the only truly strong relationship in the entire film, because it was actually dedicated time. Anyway, he dog meets a scarf and finds the villain and then kills him. The end. Okay, I'm done. What the fuck is this movie, man? Seriously. There's a massive tonal and pacing problem throughout this entire film. That's the reason why I break down the plot like I did, because it's the best way to show you that there is no plot. It's a tiny needle that threads itself into nothingness. This plot is constantly stopping and starting between its story events. They go to Africa, Mum dies, wait until plot. They go to Bosnia, Duke dies, wait until plot. They go to Russia, Rasputin dies, wait until plot. Conrad goes to the front, he dies, wait until plot. Oxford goes to the embassy, Scarf Lady dies, wait until plot. They go to the villain dies. End. The movie is constantly just people telling Oxford to go there and kill that. And then he does, then he goes home and waits until the next story point comes in. It's like a video game with different quest givers. It starts with Kitchener and then it goes to the king. It's boring writing and it's really boring to watch, not to mention repetitive. And it's why I became so disengaged with the plot after Rasputin. Not to mention the time used between these points is horribly mismanaged. Some scenes like the son's war stuff is given way too much time, while the actual spy action stuff, it barely takes up any of the actual movie. In a spy movie, legit, there are only like 4 fights. The one with Rasputin, which is fast but boring. The son's fighting in the dark, which serves to just show how bad fighting on the front was. The fight against the scarf chick, which only lasted like a good 3 minutes. And then there's the end of the movie, which is nothing but action. And there's actually one more bearable moment to the film because it's actually being a spy movie. Who could have figured? Not to mention it's really hard keeping up with the movie when every scene changes the tone of the entire picture. It's like there were 5 directors who all thought they were making different movies and it was all Frankenstein together. Not to mention the massive time skips skip through the actual character progression of the cast. I mean, why would I want to learn more about Oxford and the sword guy when there's more Rasputin tongue I could be having? Ew! Gross! For example, the big organization of villains, the main antagonists of the plot, are dealt with practically off-screen as they all die as soon as they come to the same room as Oxford. The German spy, Lenin and Prinsep, never get to interact with Oxford or anyone in any meaningful way. They're just here for references and to push the plot, which is a big letdown because I would think that the most interesting part of your historical action comedy would be making fun of previous historical figures and placing them into fictional settings. But the movie's too serious for that, and there are no historical jokes in the entire movie! The closest they get is with Rasputin, but they just make him some crazy magic guy who was just boring and not funny. To give them props, they do a really good job making the actor Rhys Ifans look like Rasputin. It's super impressive. But again, I don't understand how they can make Rasputin boring. He's Rasputin. The furthest they get to actually giving him a personality is referencing his love of eating and having sex. And that's it. Also Russian dancing for some reason. You could trade him for any other Russian guy and everything would play out the exact same. If this was a real comedy, you would make fun of the fact that Rasputin was a fraud and a smelly peasant nobody liked. You could make plenty of jokes of him pretending he was magical, or you could have him die instantly to the cyanide in the cake. That'd be funny. That'd be an actual joke based on the character. Instead they make a scary magic wizard man, which is boring, and it takes me out of the realism. He literally affects the plot of the film with his magic as he fixes Oxford's leg. Is this movie serious or not? Every character is the cardboard box. Oxford talks and acts like a guy from the modern century, with his references to the British Empire and war. In fact, the end of the film relies on him having the hindsight that World War II was going to happen, which makes no sense for the time. And his whole pacifist thing is practically forgotten about, as he's constantly flip-flopping. One moment killing is bad, the next he's gunning down people like it's nothing. The worst part has to be that he's friends/knows everybody, from the Archduke to the King himself. It's another part of the film that is annoying and it takes me out of the experience. The nanny has no character outside of, boys, am I right? And that's it. The only plot relevance she actually has is when she kisses Oxford, but again, that comes out of nowhere, and it never gets referenced ever again. So really, her character is just sniper chick. And maybe, I guess, gun chick, because she shoots a lot of guns. Boo-boo! The sidekick sword guy doesn't do anything for most of the film, and like most sidekick badasses, has no real character and is practically just there for fights. Though his interactions with Oxford at the end of the film is actually quite good, like his fear of heights. That was actually kind of funny. The main villain makes no sense because it's never explained why or how he gathered up these historical figures together, and his motives are not well pronounced, and they don't carry this serious plot. You could easily make a villain who wants to get revenge on Britain for its past atrocities, and you could have a legitimate discussion about that. But that would be too serious for a comedy. Then don't make your movie serious then! If you don't want to make the jokes about the characters, or go in depth on a topic that isn't war is bad, am I right? Then don't use these characters or have your plot revolve around them. There have been plenty of historical spy movies set in World War I and beyond that don't have this problem because they focus on the historical setting. The movie is laughably unfunny. The only time anybody had a chuckle was near the end of the movie with the jokes that were more James Bondsy. And those were good, like the parachute joke. But again, it's a little late for a movie to make its action comedy an action comedy in the final scenes of the film. It really sucks that they barely bothered to make any historical jokes because, again, the great thing about historical figures like those found in World War I is that we already know their character and their story. It's already written for you. And why not use and make fun of more historical figures like Felix Yusupov or Tsar Nicholas II or Winston Churchill, Hindenburg, and so many more. If you're going to make historical figures crucial to your plot, I say go all in, like Death of Stalin. Really, the long and short of my complaints to this movie either had to be a funny comedic action spy film, which made jokes based on history, or be an ultra serious movie, which focuses on the horrors of war and the effects of past mistakes in an action spy setting. They obviously failed to do both and left us with a movie which is a boring blend of everything. You can make a comedy historical movie which has loads of time skips, changing tones, and uses real life events and people to push its narrative. And that movie would be Forrest Gump. Or have jokes about historical figures and actually give them character, like Horrible Histories, or Bill and Ted's Adventure, or Death of Stalin. What sucks is that they did this in the trailer. Like, the joke about Princep's weak arm is funnier and has more character than any other joke in the entire movie. How does that happen? I barely even went into how this movie butchers or changes historical events and makes them worse. Like how the villain makes the German spy send the Zimmerman telegram to Mexico. Which is stupid, because he was calling a weak state, which was in a civil war and was in massive debt, to fight America. And it would have been crushed in like a couple of weeks. Plus, would have made the Americans join the war against the Central Powers anyway. Whoops! The idea was dumb in real life, but having one of the henchman villains do it just makes it even worse. Why not have the Kaiser do it? And have the Germans probably fail to convince him not to? That could be actually funny. There could actually be some jokes about that. I really do hope that somebody will make a history buff-like video on this movie, because there's so much content to be had here. However, the cinematography in this movie is actually amazing. By far the best aspect of the entire film. Not only is it fast and creative in its angles, but also employs dynamic lighting, mise-en-scene, and zooms, which help to enforce any action on screen, from shooting a gun to a guy tying up his shoes. Visually, there is never a daft moment, and the direction fits perfectly for an action comedy. It just sucks that it was paired with this one. The best camera work of the film can be seen in its final scenes, during the fight outside and with the main villain. Though it's great throughout. Looking back, it sort of reminds me of Edgar Wright's style of cinematography in his movies like Baby Driver or Hot Fuzz. The good visuals can also be a detriment, however, as some scenes like Rasputin's fight have an interesting camera work and visuals, but the actual action it's supporting is really bland. And there's this weird effect or something that they use on Rasputin that makes every action look slow while the camera is acting super fast. It feels like what happens when you mix cereal into a world-class soup. It's a real waste of soup. But again, going back to the whole it feels like multiple directors thing, some scenes are edited horribly. The worst having to be the scene explaining the royal cousins and the start of World War One, because the camera work and editing is completely different to the rest of the film. And the transition to this scene comes from absolutely nowhere. It feels more like a horrible history sketch, and the visuals get oddly surrealist, like a mountain of bullets behind us shooting artillery. Some camera work here is still good, like the moving camera on the charge and the creation of the trench lines, which presents the depth and progression of the war in a clever visual way. But again, nothing else in the film is like this, so it stands out like a sore thumb. For positives about the story, I did like the connection between Oxford and his son. At times it's an interesting dynamic, as it compares the perspectives of a war veteran and a boy growing up in World War One. And his struggle to get past his father's wealth and status really makes Conrad a brave, if naive, character. Sadly, that gets cut down pretty quickly. I really like the opening scene with Conrad running up to see his mother, and Oxford covering up her face before he can see her. I felt a lot of emotion in that scene. It gave off a very Mufasa Lion King vibe, in spite of the bad acting of the mum and child. I can excuse the kid, but the acting of the mum's death is really bad. Damn it, why can't this movie have anything good? Whatever good things I have to say, there are like 20 bad things that overshadow it. I'd probably imagine that the pacing problems and tonal changes of the story could be linked to how much this movie was pushed back, but again, that doesn't excuse the quality of this product, and judging it as it is, I'd simply say that this is a very boring film. That fails as an action film, in spite of the camera work and fun set pieces. It's supported by a weak story, and the action itself is tonally different and is barely present. It fails as a historical film due to its misuse of historical figures and events. It fails heavily as a comedy because the film in general has barely any jokes. And I'm sick of talking about it. Just watch the trailer and just imagine a better movie. But anyway, I'm Bloodleak signing off. Thanks for watching, I'll catch you all later. Adios.